Creative Alliance Showcase. We'd like to welcome you to our show. We are here at the local, and we are locals. Jennie is an author and painter. I am an author and performer, and we're happy to be here today with you guys. So FlintUnderground.org, if you're probably watching us there, is kind of like our web presence where we have lots of different events. We have our monthly Creative Collaborative Night, which is an open mic, open canvas, the Artwalk, which is a real big hit, all sorts of cool stuff. Anything you'd probably not expect to see. It's going on, and it's in Flint, and it's available on FlintUnderground.org, so you should check it out. But you may be watching us on public access, channel 17.
On Mondays at 6 p.m.
On Mondays at 6 p.m., in which case we do appreciate you watching, but you know there is a longer version of the show available online again at FlintUnderground.org, so you should check that out if you're into what you see. So the Creative Alliance, what are we, who are we, what do we do, all that fun stuff? Well, we are artists and activists. We are painters, poets, organizers, dancers, actors, models, photographers, filmmakers, writers, DJs, musicians, designers, comedians, performers, and crafters, which I forgot until this very show, so I apologize to all the crafters out there. Our mission is to organize events and activities to support art, culture, education, and our community. We want to encourage an atmosphere that makes people proud to live in Flint. Now, if this sounds like an organization that you're into and you want to be part of, we meet every Wednesday at 7 o'clock at Churchill's Bar and Grill right here on South Saginaw, across from the pavilion, except for, of course, the third Wednesday, which is that aforementioned Creative Collaborative Night with the open mic, open canvas, which is the third Wednesday of every month, 7 to 10, for free, the Good Beans Cafe in Carriagetown. Google it. If you want to become a member of the CA or have your event announced on a show like this or online, you can get over to Jennie. Her email is jenny6300577 It's listed right here, hopefully. Oh, it's listed up here. Sorry. You're bad at editing these things. But remember, anybody can show up to a meeting and anybody can really have a voice. We're about kind of giving artists a voice and a presence downtown. Today on our show, we're going to have a couple cool guests. We're going to have Thomas Selva from Two Islands, which is the winning London-based design firm that won the Public Art Project's Flat Lot competition, so we're excited to have him here. We have writer and archaeologist Drummond, who's going to talk about a really cool archaeological find, I believe, out in Flushing.
And all over too. He's also going to show us some old ancient art.
Going to show us some real cool artifacts about art. And then, of course, we have her musician Kedree on Covert Operations, and Thick as Thieves, and Kedree and Friends, and Celebrity Death Tokes, and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned for that. But the first thing I want to do is read some events. You guys want to hear some events? Cool, let's get into that. So Friday, May 31st, 7 p.m. to 11:30, the Awkward Chuckle Comedy Tour. Ryan Gregory, Jerry Fells, Alita will all be playing at the Flint Local 432 right here in our home, just downstairs, and I think that's $7.
I'm not sure.
It's not listed. I'm pretty sure it's $7, $5. Something cheap and affordable. You should definitely check it out if you haven't been to the local in a while. Saturday, June 1st, 11 a.m. You can learn how to make your own beauty and body care products at home. You can learn that at the Whaley Historical House Museum off Chavez and Kersley Street, watching Jan Reeves perform demonstrations in homemade products. There's refreshments, and you can take a tour of the vintage house.
That is a really cool house.
That's at 11 a.m. That same day, June 1st, Peace Mob Gardens will be hosting the U of M Flint Social Work Club in Edinburgh, Flint. They're doing a rain barrel creation workshop giveaway. Everybody in the community is invited. It's going to go to supporting struggling community gardens. I believe that starts at 10 a.m. Check out Peace Mob Gardens Facebook for more information on that. That same June 1st, there's a Pure Romance party, a Mary Kay party, Pink Zebra, Tasteful Simple, massage, foot and facelift treatments, psychic readings, and all sorts of cool door prizes and stuff at the New Beginnings Fair in East Court Street in Burton. Check that out. That's from 6 to 9. Saturday, June 8th, 1:30 to 2:30, next to the FIA and Bauer Theater, there will be a beer tent for part of the annual art fair, which is going on that weekend. Check it out. I think it's $5 to $8 to get in. You get to see lots of local vendors, lots of national vendors, and really get a sense of what our community has to offer on that level.
I thought it was interesting that I only got the information about the beer tent. I don't know why I didn't.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, oh, she's actually talking about the art fair.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out too, but they only sent me the beer tent.
The stuff that matters, really.
Yeah, really.
That same day, Thick Steve's will be performing at the Free Music Festival in Freeland. It's free, and it's in Michigan, and it's in a park, and I think it's noon to 9. Just check it out.
And
Kedree, one of our guests,
we'll
talk about that later. Friday, June 14th, we will be having our Juneboree at Churchill's Bar and Grill, which is our annual freak show, fun, awesome event. Flint Underground's doing the art. Me and Jennie will be hosting a version of the dating game where we're going to pair up local people and send them on the way on a date that we're going to film for Flint Underground for you guys at home, so be sure to check that out.
Lots of artists. Where are the artists going to be?
If you guys are interested in becoming an artist for that event, call Pauly. His number is 610 something 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 something. You can check him out on Facebook if you don't have his phone number.
We're going to have vintage vendors there
There's
also.
going to be vintage vendors.
And what are the bands again?
We're going to have Arlozan, The Herd, and Mistaken for Satellites play, which are all very cool bands. We've had Arlozan and The Herd on the show. We've never had Mistaken for Satellites, but we've tried to get them on here before. Maybe next time
Maybe
if you see
someday.
this episode. Someday. And then the day after that, June 15th, Covert Operations, which is Kedree's other band, is going to be playing at the Buttermilk Jamboree with Russ Roots playing after Russ Roots. That should be a cool show. I don't have too many more events, but we do have a pretty cool show for you guys today. So let's get into our first guest after these quick words from our underwriters, because of course we're at the Flint Local now. Costs have gone way down. We're not in the basement no more. We're paying $50 a show. We're paying $10 a show. And you can help us pay those costs. You can be one of our underwriters and get, what is it, 2 30-second commercials or 1 60-second commercial, and one of the Flint Underground shows of your choice. You can contact Jennie for that. So let's see who contacted Jennie. Let's go to that right now.
Page's Bookstore is locally owned and is located at 132 West 2nd Street in downtown Flint at Buckham Alley. Showcase for local authors and artists. Visit during the second Friday Artwalk.
Get a fresh start for yourself and your family by using your tax return to get rid of your debt. Hi, I'm attorney Fred Myers, and for over 25 years, I have been your local bankruptcy attorney helping you in our community. Eliminate your credit card debt, avoid your utility shutoff, and stop those harassing phone calls. Now's the perfect time to make a huge change in your life in a positive way. There's only one phone call you need to make, and that's 810-238-0900.
So we're back. Thanks to all those guys that sponsored the show. Back with our first guest. I want to welcome Thomas Selva to the show.
Thank you.
Thomas is from Two Islands, a London-based design firm that won the Flint Public Art Project's Flatlock competition. And what was the name of your design?
It's called Mark's House, but now it's known as the Floating House.
Floating House, and that's because it's got like mirrors or something that make it look like it levitates?
Exactly right. So what we've done is we've created your typical Tudor home that you have here around the suburbs of Flint, 1,300 square feet, taken it, posed it up in the air, 12 feet up, and it's on a podium with all reflective sides. And the idea is that the design will make you believe that it's floating. There's also a water feature called the water show that makes it look like it's pushing from below the ground up into the air. So yeah, it's going to be exciting.
So just so everybody at home, if they don't know, the kind of qualifications for it, which you guys were trying to address, what could also be a stage. I should have closed my windows. What could have been a stage as well as kind of a performance space?
That's right. So it's going to be center stage for all of the summer events in Flint for the next 4 to 5 months. And the idea is that it'll provide seating, it will also provide stage. So it's going to be an audiovisual installation by an artist coming all the way from Germany named Alaska. All of the details of which are available through our website, which is twoislands.net. So yeah, there's going to be plenty of events, I'm sure.
This call for artists that you responded to, I guess, was put out by the Flint Art Project, right? So that's what you're...
That's correct. So what it was an international competition with over 400 entries, and we were ever so lucky to get first place. So this has been an amazing push by, obviously, Flint Public Art Project in association with the AIA and other associations of architecture firms locally here in Flint.
So when is that going to be done, or when is the opening?
So the opening is anytime between mid-June and mid-July. And yeah, please come by. it's going to be fantastic.
So the June Artwalk, you probably wouldn't be ready for the June Artwalk.
We're going to try. We're going to push real hard. We're going to try.
That's when we have our June parade too, so that'd be great. People should get there early so they can get to everything that month. It should be a really killer Artwalk.
Now, is it going to be the facade of the house, or can somebody go inside this house?
It's just the podium area. You can walk in and around. We're going to make sure that it's an experience.
So are you from England, or are you just moved from England?
I founded what is the London branch of Two Islands. It was originally created by William Villalobos and Cesc Massanas. And William is from Venezuela, Cesc is half Dutch, half Spanish, and I'm Spanish originally from Madrid, so it's a real cosmopolitan.
So you're going to be here, you're here now until the project is finished, probably?
I'm here for the next week for sure, to make sure that we kickstart the construction. And then William and Cesc will be coming as well throughout the construction and for the opening.
Now, is this something that we're going to need a lot of volunteers for locally here? Like volunteers?
Yes, absolutely. So we've provided a brief, and we're going to get skilled laborers, carpenters. But if people would like to come forward to help, we very much appreciate that. And they can just contact us through the website, twoislands.net, or by all means come up to the Flint Public Art Project and contact Stephen Sachs or Jerome.
Now you had mentioned another thing that people can contribute to Citizens of Flint.
Yes, so this is the great thing. So this is about a month ago we decided, right, we want to do a really fantastic ceiling installation where you walk up and even at night you just go, wow, this is incredible. So we thought, why don't we tile it up in such a way that people can send in their pictures from all over the world and they can feature as part of the installation, be part of the architecture. So we provided an international online platform where people could send in their pictures for a small fee, which was literally to cover the cost of each of the tiles that we're providing. We're talking about 4,000 tiles up on the ceiling. And these are acrylic backlit tiles with LEDs or focus lights across the top of it. So it's something that you're really going to notice when you walk up. It's a beam with a very strong light when you're underneath. So the beauty of it is that it kick-started, it went amazing. We got covered 10% of the tiles from international users. And a lot of universities got into this whole idea of what is effectively crowdsourcing architecture in a strange way and got really excited. So we funded half of the project that way. And then I got to Flint about 4 days ago and started realizing, well, this is silly. We got a lot of international users, which is great because people who love architecture are seeing this and going, wow, this is a great idea. Let's crowdfund architecture. But then I realized, well, actually, it's the people of Flint that want to walk out to this and recognize their picture up on the ceiling and feel represented by the architecture in their hometown. So then we started talking to businesses, and the local businesses in and around the area have been fantastic. And they said, look, we'll start sponsoring local residents. So if you could show our logo in one of the tiles, we'll sponsor whatever residents so that they can go on there for free. And we're trying really hard to provide a medium that is maybe not just an email address, so we can send photographers out to people that may not be able to send in their pictures and take pictures, then put them up on the ceiling, and over the next month have them feature an installation. So we've got as much as 3,600 free pictures for anybody in Flint. And if you'd like to access it directly, it's via our website, again, twoislands.net. And in there you'll find directions. It's on the front page, if you're from Flint, how to get there. And also for local businesses, if you'd like to sponsor local residents.
You said that it's going to be acrylic tiles that you're going to
it's all
kind of silk screen the image on in a way, or
yeah. So we're gonna, when you send us your picture, what we're gonna do is we're gonna edit it so that it works perfectly with an installation to a certain extent, but keep it as real as possible. And it's in black and white.
So
it's a series, exactly. So it's a series of gray tones. But if you send us a digital image, we'll make sure that it gets that.
Right. So we can probably send you a colored image, you can convert it to black and white.
Absolutely.
But it's a photograph, not a painting.
It can be anything you like. So if you want to send us a profile picture, it could be your Facebook, It could be what represents Flint to you. It could be your university. It could be your friends. Please get creative. Like, we really want people to just show, what Flint means to them or a bit of their personality.
Yeah.
And the few days you've been here, what have you seen with Flint?
Lots. I've met a lot of people. A lot of people want to make a real difference. So I'm incredibly happy that at least the part of the city is going in this direction. And also, we made a decision to try to source as many of the materials locally and to recycle as many of the materials as possible. And so that it's not only something for the community, but it's something that is economically viable for Flint, and it will, in future, will be of benefit and not just a short-term benefit.
Now, so is this piece though, parking lot, how long is it going to be there? It's not a permanent exhibit, right? How long will it be there?
It's going to be there for 4 months, and then we have to make way for, if this happens again, if Flint would so choose to do another competition next year. I wish the best of luck to the next architect to come along and try to do what we've done.
Yeah, sounds great.
It's going to be awesome. I'm really excited to see it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Let's go to a few clips from Flint Underground videos and show you what they've been missing.
Yeah. It's the street level view of Flint, Michigan, and despite what you might have heard,
It's
we
great
have
and
a great
beautiful.
time. And
Pretty beautiful.
there's people that they leave, they come back, because it's just a really great community.
All right, let's check that out real quick.
Me just a work for it, so just pray for me, just pray for me, just pray for me, just pray for me. Come here, go work to it, me just a work to it, till every minute of the day me get a bread for it, so just pray for me, just pray for me. Me call one of these things gonna be the make of me. Yo, she's the kind of sister, she a study her book, I that the way she a look, I that she want to achieve, she a make the green for her family. So to be a doc, I that she have to believe in this day and age, yo, she have to focus and just do her thing and don't give up like Martin Luther. She had a dream, but the difference with her, she not see. She does a work to it, she does a work to it, she does a work to it, she does a work to it. So just pray for her, just pray for her, just pray for her, just pray for her, cause she a work to it, she does a work to it, till every minute of the day she get her bread for it. So just pray for her, just pray for her, because one of these books gonna be the make of her.
I'm just gonna play one of my own here. It's called Surfing Stories.
Whispered me and walked through the fire. You painted your eyes, but you haven't changed a bit. You still flow like a feather. It's lying in the wind. And all of the while, kept my thoughts to myself. Wild snakes curl up in my bed. I was wondering. Strapped to my bells, tongue of a snake so close to mine, told me stories, held me tight.
famous people, Flint. What do we have here? Then I think this is Emma Davis over here. Yes, it is. I know these guys.
fast.
So remember, if you want to see any of those videos, because it was like little teasers, if you want to see all of them in their entirety, go to flintunderground.org and you can watch our videos.
For sure.
Yeah. And we're here with Alan Drummond. He's an archaeologist that works for the Sloan Museum here in Flint.
Welcome.
Alan?
Hey everybody.
Hi. So you got some art artifacts for us here too. Or do you want to talk a little bit about the Sloan and what the work you've been doing first?
Not a whole lot, other than right now I'm cataloging the Native American collection there. There's almost 3,000 pieces that were found by the original settlers as they arrived, and a few have been donated over the years, but they've never been fully cataloged. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, and I have 3 interns who are doing most of the data entry for me. So
when you say catalog, do you have to figure out how old they are and everything? And
I look at the pieces, and having done 40 years of field archaeology, I pretty much can identify pieces within a couple of hundred years, diagnostics at least. So I identified what it is, what its function was, the time period, the material it's made out of, the location of where that raw material may have come from, time period, cultural affiliation, the technique that was used, and the pieces that I brought today all represent a variety of methods of manufacture. And then a miscellaneous, each piece has its own unique reflection of the person that created it. So I get just the slightest hint of who that person was when I get to work with that piece. And then I display artifacts at the Artwalk, which is how I met you, Jennie. And I have a little sign that says, if form must follow function, where does function end and art begin? And that's how we ended up here, because we're going to talk about functional tools that also express artistic expression as far as the choice of the raw materials, the execution of the manufacture of the piece, because Native Americans didn't necessarily have the ability to hang their art on the wall like we do, so they incorporated it into their everyday pieces.
This is functional art.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how far are you cataloging that collection already?
I'm probably about 300 pieces into the 3,000, and I've been there about a year and 4 months. So
you see this is a very long term.
Yeah, it's going even slower than I thought. So that's good though. And occasionally I've seen maybe a half a dozen pieces that are probably pieces that the Smithsonian doesn't even have.
Wow.
They're specific to this area, to probably an individual's unique circumstance at a given time, and so they created a piece that is a one of a kind. But and then other times I just see a standard artifact that has such exquisite expression. I mean, I look at these pieces under magnification, so sometimes I'll look at a lateral edge and I'll see that the creator of this piece beveled the last 1/100th of this lateral edge, and you wouldn't have even seen it if it was not under magnification. It probably didn't translate into making the tool or artifact any more useful, but it did fulfill that artistic expression.
So if somebody wanted to see these artifacts that you're cataloging, are they at the Sloan now? I mean, are they being on display?
Well, they're not available to the public at this point. Now, there is a permanent display at Sloan, there has been, and that's a big part of our history based on the idea, and we'll hopefully touch on that Flint, the name Flint, and the logo of Flint is a projectile point, and so how that all came about. But the display itself has amazing artifacts, but it's a 35-year-old plus exhibit. So all of the field work that's taken place during that time has somewhat changed the time frames of some of these artifacts. So they're still valid, but they're out of context. So one of the things I'd like to do at the end of getting this cataloging done is to revisit that particular space and redo it. And we have a new curator, because I'm at the Perry Archives at Sloan Longway, where the Buick Gallery is. I'm not in the main building. And he really believes in rotating exhibits and getting pieces out and moving them in. And so even if we just had a small kiosk, say, of artifacts that changed monthly or bi-monthly, then that would, I think, really enhance the experience of going to the museum, because so often, if you've gone, you see the very same things. With the, currently we have the Civil War exhibit, which is an amazing exhibit, and it's directed toward the local people who participated in that. But for the most part, you see the same things. So it would be a nice way to make it fresh. And that seemed to have been the single biggest thing that doomed Auto World, was that it was a one-horse pony. You know, you went in, you saw it, and there was no motivation. Yeah, thank you, to return. Yeah, I was thinking of one-horse town is what we were. That was another part of it, subconscious.
Well, what were we before the one-horse town? Give us a little...
Okay, well, the first people that arrived came in right after the retreat of the glacier. In fact, the two earliest sites in the state of Michigan are along Saginaw Street in Genesee County, and they were producing the first manufactured artifact, and really the first product created in the Americas, and that's called the Clovis point. And this particular piece is a Clovis point, and it's made out of Flint Ridge flint from southern Ohio, Licking County, Ohio. And much of what we see in the early artifacts are created out of flints from south of here, because the people were moving up from the south as the glacier retreated. So, and these were generally about a foot long originally, and they were hunting megafauna, mastodons, mammoths. There was a short-faced bear that, from the remains, indicates it was around 15 feet tall and about 3,500 pounds.
Wow.
So, real challenge. Saber-toothed tigers, dire wolves, the beaver were the size of cattle. So it was a tough way to make a living, but if you did make a kill, then you ate well for a while. And it was so cold that everything stayed fresh. So Clovis is the earliest artifact form we find anywhere in the Americas, and it's found in every state but Hawaii. And right now we have a site in Virginia, Cactus Hill, that predates the 16,000 BC level at Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, which was generally considered to be the earliest site in the United States. And this site, Cactus Hill, dates to well over 20,000 BC. And the projectile points that we find there are halfway between Clovis and Solutrean, a point being made in the Iberian Peninsula of Europe, about 21 to 23,000 BC.
So the thought is that these Clovis peoples came from the Iberian Peninsula?
It looks as if the first wave of migration, and these were seafaring people as well, so it would make sense that they could have come along the ice sheet and made their way to the Americas well over 20,000 years ago. We've always known there were multiple waves of migration, the Eskimos being the very last, but we didn't know that the first wave possibly came from Europe. And we have extracted mitochondrial DNA from the collagen that contains a genetic marker, hapalog X, that occurs only in Europe. So that, and the fact that the skulls are long European skulls, make it a pretty strong case that...
does that rewrite a lot of the history?
Oh, it does, and it pretty much splits the field of the Clovis first, and these new people who are championing the cause at Clovis Hill, predominantly Dennis Stafford at the Smithsonian. And so there's a small war going on, and there's a lot of entrenched old attitudes that are having to revisit everything that we know. And really what I see is that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. Maybe the most powerful is that the makers of these Clovis points and the makers of the Solutrean point in Europe are the only flint knappers in the history of the world that we have evidence of that could do something called overshot, which is take a flake all the way across the face of a projectile point as they were manufacturing it. Almost everyone else would start at one lateral edge, take a flake to the middle, then go over to the other lateral edge and take a flake to the middle. And then as they did that, you ended up with a medial ridge running right down the middle of the piece. That was the last thing removed to make it aerodynamic. The Clovis and Salutrium makers are the only people that practice something called overshot, which was the ability to take a flake all the way across the face of the plane.
Is that because of the tools they were using?
No, I think it was just because they were extremely skilled. I think the tools were pretty common to all Flint knappers, but I think they just had a very strong belief in what they were doing. But when you consider they were making foot-long spear points, one mistake would have created a whole lot more work from them. So they must have been extremely skilled and very adaptive. And we know that these were modern-brained humans. Very extraordinary in many ways.
Are there any thoughts as to what made them transition from the Iberian Peninsula? Was there a food shortage maybe for the...
You know, not so much so as we've theorized with the Asian migration, where they were probably just following herds and didn't even realize they were leaving Asia.
And that's across the Bering Land Bridge.
Yes.
Native American peoples.
West.
So we think that they probably just put out to sea and started following that ice sheet. And they would put in and get melt snow if they needed fresh water, and hunt for food if they didn't catch something actually in the ocean itself. And then hit the southeastern United States and around Virginia. Al Goodyear at the University of South Carolina is digging a site along the Savannah River. He's dating to around 40,000.
Wow.
So this is, Cactus Hill is along the Nottoway River in South Carolina. Or in Virginia, and in South America, Pedro Ferrada is almost 50,000. So South America in some places has even earlier sites than us. So there's a very confusing picture out there yet, and linguists have told us that the diversity of Native American languages and the subdialects indicate that they've been here at least 25 to 35,000 years, but we just have not been able to find the sites. They're too small and too widely scattered. But apparently some people have done that now. So this represents the earliest time period that we see in archaeology, and that's called Paleo, P-A-L-E-O. And it's strictly big game hunting on a massive scale. And it was done right here in the Flint area. So that's Paleo. The next time period that appears is represented by a shift into a different climate and also a different vegetation. The ice bridge moves back, and we get the pine, then the broadleafs moving in, and a lot of smaller plants, edible plants that are available. So we see a more balanced subsistence, and that's hunter-gatherer. And at that time also, we start to see the very first aspects of ceremonial life, their spiritual aspect, the totems and that type of thing. And that's represented in a piece that I brought by something called a birdstone. And this particular piece is from a farm. It was excavated in northern Genesee County. And this is rose granite. And birdstones have drill holes through the back and underneath, and the front and underneath. And we theorize, because anthropology is very subjective, it's not pure science, it's more of a discipline, that there was a thong running through this, and that it was attached to a spear chucker, an atlatl, that was intermediate between a bow and the spear. And that this probably was a good luck piece. And these are, the peak of these are about 4300 BC to about 3400 BC, and then they disappear, and we don't see anything like them reappear in the tool inventory. So,
is it a very specific region that you find these?
Throughout the Midwest, yeah, but yeah, nothing beyond that. And
always the bird.
You know, and again, that's subjective. It appears to be a bird.
Right.
Most likely it is. Some of them have eyes protruding out. They're called stargazers. And the unique thing is that they're almost always made out of a beautiful raw material. So banded slate, porphyry, which is a speckled granite that has a number of different colors running through it, and shale occasionally, but mostly slate. are the raw materials of choice that they made for these. These appear to have the ceremonial totem aspect for the first time. At this point, we theorize that they probably get into a yearly cycle where they're following the herds and they're also taking advantage of whatever comes into season at a particular time. So they're familiar with their routes, and they're probably becoming a lot more familiar with the raw materials that are available within that region. Mm-hmm. And yet population densities are still very small. Right. And there doesn't seem to be any evidence at this point, other than random, of any violence or any negative interactions going on.
And how many of these have you found in your career?
In 40 years, I've found 4 of these, and they're the rarest artifact in the Midwest, and they're extremely valuable and extremely rare. And while they do have the ceremonial appearance, they do have enough little dings and dents on them, if you look at it under magnification, that tell you that they had a functional aspect as well as a ceremonial civic effect. That is the Archaic period. So we go Paleo. If we assume Cactus Hill is correct, say 22,000 BC to about 10,000 BC is Paleo. Then we move into Archaic, which is the hunter-gatherer stage. And that runs from roughly 10,000 BC up to just a few hundred years before Christ's birth. Mm-hmm. And at that time, a group in southern Ohio known as Adena start growing what becomes corn. Mm-hmm. And they somehow acquire maize seed from Mexico. Oh, really? And a weed that just grew 2 or 3 kernels, they regrew on the floodplains of the Ohio River Basin until they kept getting better and better quality and more kernels on it. And they also start growing beans and squash. And so then we see an expansion of their tool inventory. And with agriculture, they're actually able to stay in permanent villages. Mm-hmm. They can travel, they do travel, but they have the ability to stay in one location. So they really expand their tool inventory. And we start seeing tools made out of granite like this. This is a celt, C-E-L-T, and this is a woodworking tool. And if you are panning in on it, you'll notice that the first third of this particular piece has a very high sheen or gloss on it, and this is from being worked against wood or a soft material that would almost polish it. And this probably was not in a handle, but these are often referred to as unhafted axes. And if you look down the edge, yeah, it's got that nice sharp edge to it here. The axes would have that as well, but they would have either a groove running either all the way around or 3/4 of the way around, or barbs that would have allowed it to be put into a handle. This may or may not have been in a handle. My looking at this under magnification indicates that it was not. There's no wear at all that would indicate it had been put into a handle. So we suddenly see a really broad tool inventory for almost all the sites. And larger population densities. They moved from families to bands to tribes. So we start to see diagnostic artifacts that last over long periods of time. Adena, the culture in Ohio that created this agricultural boom, morphed into something called Hopewell. And we don't know.
Those are the mound builders?
Mound builders, yes, absolutely. And we don't know if Adena morphed into Hopewell, if Hopewell came in and took over Adena and adopted many of their spiritual practices as well. But yes, they built the mounds, and they're also some of the first pottery makers. So very dynamic cultural horizon. And they extended all the way up into the Flint area. They needed 140 frost-free days for their crops. So anything north of, say, Saginaw Bay, they couldn't be sure of the 140 days. But Hopewell was definitely here. We see a lot of their diagnostic projectile points, which are known as Schneider's points. I found them all all along the Flint River most of my life, and they're usually made out of this Flint Ridge from southern Ohio that we saw the Clovis Point made out, which by the way has every color of the rainbow running through it. So this white and red only represents a small amount of the colors that were available. And yeah, it expresses again that artistic impulse, but it also was the most predictable as far as all the flints in the Midwest as to how it would fracture when you were working with it. So it was not only aesthetically the most pleasing, it was the purest raw material available to them as well. So it was the best of both worlds.
Do you find particular colors of Clovis points in certain regions?
I haven't seen any kind of pattern that would stand out, and that's true even into the Woodland time period when they were bringing it up here. It was pretty much whatever they could get, and then of course trade. And at that time, we're also starting to see a lot of trade across North America. So 3 of the sites that I found Flint Ridge at in this Genesee County area and up into Tuscola County, I've also found obsidian from out in Wyoming on the very same site. So 2 what we would call exotic raw materials, along with the local Bayport, which is the local chert, actually it's not Flint, that comes from the little town of Bayport up in the Thumb along Saginaw Bay. There's a variety of pieces starting to be traded. There's probably transcontinental trade networks in place. Our Lake Superior Basin copper from the Upper Peninsula has been found as far away as Oklahoma. And we have conch shells in burials up here that come from the Gulf Coast. So there was a lot of material being moved and traded, and probably a lot of communication. And again, still no evidence of widespread conflict. They seem to have been living in pretty good harmony. Now, we have not dug burials as archaeologists in Michigan since 1970 or 71.
Why is that?
Well, that's when the law was passed, that and it should have always been just common sense that people's resting places should be sacred and left alone. But there are always people that are willing to go the extra mile to see what they can find. And there's very little evidence of violent, catastrophic injuries and death in these burial stations till around 13 or 1400 AD, just prior to Columbus's arrival. And at that point, they've gone from families to bands to tribes, and they've evolved into something called chiefdoms. And these chiefdoms are the first political entity where the son of the chief gets the job rather than following the individual who you believed in the most and maybe was most qualified.
Now, there were a lot of those, I remember from my basic anthropology classes down in Florida, right? They weren't too much up here.
Well, they were predominantly associated with the Mississippi River.
Oh, okay.
That's where the greatest chiefdoms occur, and they occur almost the whole length from up in Wisconsin, Minnesota, down along there. And of course, in Illinois, the largest base of a mound in the world at Cahokia exists. It's even bigger than the Great Pyramid at Giza. And that's a national park, and that can be visited, but very few people even are aware of its existence.
Now, I know when I was kind of researching the Hopewell in school, they had said that the majority of the farmers, when they came into the country, had just basically demolished most of these sites. Are there any mounds left in Michigan and Flint?
Yeah, actually there are. There is a very large mound on Willard Road on a private farm, and I'm not allowed to divulge where that is. And from what I've been able to research, there were mounds on every bend of the Flint River. So almost like they were road signs. And I found a few of the remnants of them, and one particular one, I did half of it vertically and half of it horizontally, excavated it, and it was completely sterile. But when I got to the subsoil, there was fire-broken rock, charcoal, flint chippage, and some broken tools. So something occurred there.
Sort of a burial ceremony.
Well, you know, they may have like consecrated the ground and had a ceremony there and then built a mound over it. There was no evidence of remains or anything there that would indicate that there had been anything catastrophic going on. I think they were just I think they just built them and they used them as like road signs, and there are also Indian trees, of which there's still one standing up on McKinley Road north of Vienna, just north of this Ragnar treatment plant there, as it follows the bend of the river, and it goes up, and then it makes a 90-degree turn, and then it makes another 90-degree turn up, and it's oriented to point across the field to where the Chippewa village stood when the Treaty of 1819 opened the Saginaw Valley for settlement.
And I've heard of a few of those, and that's just stuff when they were young trees, they would bend them back.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, they bent the saplings into a particular configuration and then oriented them to point in a particular place. I think this one speaks specifically to Chief Naom's village.
Oh, very cool. That was the resident of Flint. That
yes.
tribe.
Yeah, it was Jacob Smith's blood brother, and he had a small village where Atwood Stadium stood, but he also, his main village was up in the Montrose area along the river up that way. And the farther north you go, you're getting closer to Saginaw Bay, which could support a very large population density. And all the rivers of the Saginaw Valley were occupied over all the time periods. So it was a very fluid, active interaction sphere, I guess you could say. The first question I always get, well, who were the people here when the whites first arrived, when the Europeans arrived in the area? And the French leave us a record of a group they called the Fire Nation, or the Assisternagin, that we think were the Sauk and Fox.
Okay.
The village that stood at Atwood Stadium was identified as Muscatawa, or it translated in Chippewa to burnt over prairie, and the Sauk and Fox would burn over large areas to keep them open for herds and that type of thing. But they were in Wisconsin when the English arrived, and the Treaty of 1819 opened the valley, although there was an awful lot of activity prior to that. And the people that were here at that time were the Chippewa, who had moved down into the lower peninsula from the upper peninsula when the French moved their outposts from the Straits, when Cadillac moved the outposts from the Straits down to Fort Pontchartrain in Detroit. And they had bought into the flintlock rifle, so they went where the French went. And the French were very accepting of the Native American ways, and they intermarried, and they fit in where the English were very ethnocentric in their attitudes toward the Native Americans, and they're kind of adversarial in much of their activity. So the last piece that I brought is a Chippewa pipe, and this may well be the actual first, or one of the first pipes of the Martin clan, which is one of the original 5 clans of the Chippewa, and there are 16 now. This is Catlinite. The raw material is Catlinite, and it's from southwest Minnesota. But it was the best raw material for making pipes. And this particular pipe has quite a patina on it. It has a long history. I'm guessing easily into the hundreds of years, and maybe even earlier than that, but that would be subjective. This flared end of it is almost Sioux style. And of course, the Chippewa and the Sioux were adversarial at this point on the west, and then on the east, the Chippewa had to deal with the Iroquois in New York and Ontario. So they were extremely dynamic groups to have to keep off your doorstep. And so anyway, this is an extraordinary example of the artistic expression and the ability to use a raw material. It's a very soft stone, but to create something that's just, they were able to capture the lifelightness of the animals. And of course, the totems were such large aspects of their religious belief. And
What is that animal?
I'm sorry?
What is that animal?
This is probably a marten or a mink,
Okay.
is what we think this probably is. And
what was the importance of these?
Well, I think they looked at the qualities of the particular animal. For instance, like the fox, they would think of the cunning. The rabbit, they would think of fertility. And these are generalizations, but they were expressing particular aspects that they respected and wanted to embody. So,
how old would you say this piece is?
again, this one's the patina on it. This is got a tremendous amount of wear, and when you look at it under magnification, you can see that there's been small amounts of damage to it. I'm guessing at least the 1700s, and probably considerably earlier than that. So
are they usually this size too? Or?
They can be bigger than this. There's a piece currently displayed at the Flint Institute of Art in their little potpourri display that's down the hall there next to the theater. That is probably 3 times this size.
Wow.
But it's a piece that had never been used, so it's a bright, bright red as compared to this particular piece that has had fire held to it so many times that it is that it's really worn and just you know, if it could talk, you know, the stories it could tell.
I'm glad we had you here. I have so many questions. Like, for example, you mentioned this is very Sioux. Is this possibly like a way to have a peaceful ceremony with them, kind of show?
Well, certainly, I think that they would. There were times when they adopted people from other tribes, and particularly when the pandemics hit and Native Americans had no natural immunities to the pathogens that Europeans brought, and estimates are upwards of 24 to 25 million Native Americans in North and South America when Columbus arrived. So when you consider that that number was reduced by 90% within almost just over a century, you get some sense of the amount of cultural chaos that must have occurred and outside their realm of being able to really understand what was occurring. And I'm sure there are many times when an individual would find himself in a village and see that there was something catastrophic going on there, not understanding that there was an incubation period for the pathogen. He would return to his home village thinking he got away in time, and in fact then became infected and infected his whole tribe. And so it just spread like a wave across the Americas. And so I think there were times that they adopted and maybe people added a particular expression. I think that they also, like all of us, see someone else's creativity and say, wow, I really like that piece and I want to add that on. So the square stem here is very much Chippewa, but this end is, you could almost say, a Sioux. And again, the Sioux and the Chippewa were bumping up against each other all those times. So this is almost a metaphor, in a sense, for the two cultures.
Well, it would be a piece like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it could very well be. And they smoked kinnikinnick, which was a bit of a relaxant, a bit of I guess it could even be a little hallucinogenic. And so,
is it the wild tobacco?
Yes, and it's still grown up in Canada, and it would be mixed with the inner bark of willow and that type of thing to help cool the smoke a little bit. It was very hot, so that's why you see the long, long stems on the pipes, because that helped cool it.
And now, sorry to cut you off, did kinnikinnick have or the tobacco smoke in general, a spiritual function as well?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, spiritual. And it was you know, much like we think of someone coming home at the end of the day and lighting their pipe and sitting by the fire kind of thing. It was, but it also, many of the cultures, they felt that this was one of the gifts of Wankantanka, which is the name the Sioux had for the Great Spirit, or the Manitou is what the Chippewa called them. So this was something that they practiced as almost a religious ceremony, as well as for their own benefit. And one of the main trade items that was passed along was tobacco. And then as the Europeans came in and brought in their tobacco, then those hybrids were involved too. But they were very much into getting the hallucinogenic aspect of it out. You know, they knew just as they did when in the early 20s they got marijuana legalized or made it illegal. If given a choice of smoking something that will make you feel really good or just smoking something, human beings are more likely to choose the thing that's going to help them.
So you're saying the Europeans bred that out of its background?
Yes.
The Native Americans didn't smoke marijuana at all?
There was marijuana. We're getting into another subject, but that's indigenous to Southeast Asia, so it was not in North America.
Oh, really?
Right.
I thought it just grew wild all over the place.
Yeah, I think that there may have been hemp, a form of that grew, but to my understanding, and I did a tour in Vietnam, that was the origin or the homeland of that particular plant, and then it was spread.
Oh, so maybe it was the Europeans that brought it over when they were making their hemp.
Yeah, I haven't researched that,
hemp.
but I'd be willing to do a study.
Yeah. It's interesting. I hear you write down the term, but for the burnt over prairie, and I've also heard another term that essentially means place of flints. And I wonder about, I've heard Flint actually doesn't have very much chert in it, so I wonder where the name came from. Do you understand?
I do actually, and thank you for asking, because that's one of the great stories to spread. When the Europeans arrived, they asked the Chippewa, what do you call the area, or what do you call the river? And they said, we call it Piwandian. And they said, well, I don't think we can spell that, so what does it mean? And they said, River of the Rocks. And whereas the French probably would have sat down and said, let's smoke a pipe and talk about it, the English just ethnocentrically assumed they knew what they meant, because there is a boblo chert that occurs along the river that's gray, that looks a little bit like the gray Bayport flint that some of the artifacts are made of. So I think they assumed they were referring to flint along the river, but the Chippewa were referring to the glacially deposited boulders that are embedded in the bottom of the Flint River and that would tip their canoes when the river was low.
Interesting.
So we should have been called Boulder, Michigan.
Right.
And
probably have a better educated populace.
Maybe. Although, Flint is an extremely unique place and it has its own history, and there are other Flints. There's a small Flint in Ohio and other Flint, cities and towns around. So I guess it is what it is, and we'll leave Colorado, Boulder.
Right. I have to ask you, these are all the artifacts, but do you ever excavate and find bones, or do you ever see any of can I ask you about the giant Indian?
Oh yeah, you can ask about the giant Indians.
Have you ever seen any of the bones or anything from the giant?
Well, I just missed them at Sloan because they had to repatriate all of the remains that were still there a few years ago. But one of the things I did when I first arrived was I spent about the first month and a half reading everything that they had in their files on the collections before I actually got into them. And one of the things I discovered was that this Charles Brown, who was known as the archaeologist of the Maumee River in Ohio, had moved up here and kind of become the local archaeologist in residence. This was before U of M Flint was here in the mid-40s, early 40s. So he did quite a bit of work in the area, and he had a very large collection that he brought up with him. And I see a lot of those pieces at Sloan, and I'm able to identify them because I'm familiar with the artifacts and the raw materials, but they're not indigenous pieces to here. So he carried out an excavation on 2 mounds on McKinley Road between Montmorris and Vienna Road in 1945. One of them was probably no more than about 1,000 years old. But the other one was very early. In fact, he called it a Folsom point, but it was actually a Clovis point. It was in there. And the bones that were in there, and this was, of course, before it was illegal to be doing this, so he wasn't breaking the law. But he had found gigantic human bones. And one of the individuals that was involved in the dig was Dr. Ray Morish, who was at the time the president of the Michigan Medical Association. So his identification of those gigantic human bones were beyond question. And at the museum, there's a front page from the Flint Journal that contains 6 pictures from the dig, and one of the 6 is Dr. Ray Morish holding a human leg bone that he can barely support, And his quote is, "These are gigantic human bones." And so we've been doing a little bit of looking into this, and apparently there was between 9.5 and 10-foot skeleton removed from just north of Lake Fenton by the University of Michigan around 1901 or 1902, and the grave goods that were associated with it were definitive Native American pieces. So I saw gigantic human bones as an undergrad at U of M Ann Arbor in the physical anthropology department, and a colleague has seen them at CMU. So they're out there, but no one has written about them.
Why?
I think it's another political football that nobody wants to take on yet. There is some evidence for this in the Middle East, and they were known as Gigantopithecus, and yet there's been no evidence of that here. And there's also some biblical references to giants, the Nephilim, I believe, as well as of course David slaying Goliath. So I think that also you're crossing disciplines here, and I think people just were more than willing to leave that alone. It's fascinating.
But do you think that these people were all related to one another, as though they were a specific tribe, or is it just some mutation that was common that would happen quite often? Or
we see both from linguistics, genetics, tool making. We see diffusion, where things innovate in one place and then spread all over the world, and then we see places where on two different sides of the world, an idea is born within a few hundred years of itself. It's like these ideas come out of what the Buddhists call or the Hindus call the crystalline grid, where this energy is stored and knowledge is stored, and when we're ready to handle it, it becomes available to us. And so if you buy into the potential of that existence, then maybe that's the dynamic that we're looking at. But here, there's no real strong evidence, but there is an awful lot of evidence that we have undersold prehistoric man's travel capacity. We know Australia was colonized over 50,000 years ago, and that was after Pangea had broken apart. So it was sitting out there in the middle of the ocean. And so people were going to have to travel over vast distances, and not even knowing that it existed. I mean, they were just voyaging, and they were able to colonize that. So I think there was a huge amount of travel. There's some people that are speculating that everyone from the Essenes to Christ himself may have been in North America at one time. And of course, there's a 20-year gap in Christ's life that we don't know.
Right. Well, according to the Mormons, he was here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
His whole tribe here. Oh, well, one of my teammates, I was a varsity basketball coach, and I played in high school and college, point guard, and one of my old teammates is a retired professor at Brigham Young, so I'll have to email him on that. Now, I know they have some unique ideas.
Well, with DNA now, I mean, they're finding out like there are more than just the Neanderthals that are not related to us. The Devons, have they taken DNA samples out of these giant Indians? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge. If they have, they haven't published it.
I would just be curious if they are their own people, or if they're just a mutation.
Well, and we have Cro-Magnon. We have there's so many unanswered questions. Even the when Clovis appears. We have all this megafauna, and almost at the exact time that the Clovis makers appear, the megafauna disappears. So the question, and we know that there was a major climatic episode that changed. The end of the glacier, the ice age retreated, and we started getting much warmer climatic episodes. And quite often, those would be the harbingers of change. For instance, when Hopewell and agriculture comes in, we were even in a slightly warmer climatic episode than we are experiencing now. And so, yet the megafauna, the mastodons and mammoths, there's a couple of islands over by Russia that evidence that they existed up to about 2,000 years ago. Whereas every place around here, they were gone 10 to 12,000 years ago.
I know they were trading mastodon tusks and stuff in Russia, and even way up north, up in around the poles, aren't but they're
Sure.
also
Sure.
still finding some of it in the
In fact, there was
ice.
a piece in National Geo just over the last couple of months about that trade still going on, and with Uplift, that stuff being exposed. I was lucky enough 2 years ago with a group of students that I had in the summer to find a portion of a mastodon tusk. And the very end of it was serrated, somewhat like this actually, along the edge. So it was modified into a tool.
Oh, interesting.
And I was only able to find one other one documented that was identical to it, and that came from out in the west. I want to say Montana, somewhere in there, and that dated to like 27,000 years ago.
And this one was locally?
Yes, I found this on this. I've been digging on the original Wicks lumber family property for 40 years. I started in 1973, and they purchased the property in 1831. So the treaty of, as I said, treaty of 1819 opened the valley. Rob Blanford still lives on the property, so the Wicks family, although they sold the Wicks lumber stores many, many years ago, their presence is still there. And they have the river running through the property, and you have high banks, then down to a floodplain, which is where Naomi's village was, and I found a lot of French trade items there, trade silver, gun flints from France. That was the best sparking flint in the world for flintlock rifles and that type of thing. And then up to a real high bank over the river at the northern end of the property, which is where I've done most of my digging. And it's right on the bend of the river, so I'd be right here, and they would have been able to look up both ends of
Yes,
it.
that would be an important area.
Yes, they could see anyone that was coming. And I've got from 1500 AD to about 6800 BC, everything in situ in the original strata that it was deposited.
Very cool.
So yeah, it was, and that 6800 BC level, that was so fortuitous because I was following a pit from an 830 AD level that was empty, sterile, until I got to the very bottom, and I found a complete ear of corn in the developmental sequence of what we have today, about half the length, but almost the circumference of a normal ear. And that's still the farthest north a complete ear of corn's ever been found in Michigan. And so, you know, I started to think, well, I can see that the outline of the pit ends here, but I'm going to go a little deeper just on the off chance that there's something below it. And as I went beneath that, I came out right on top of a hearth, almost 4 feet down, fire broken rock and a circular charcoal, and there were 2 broken spear point bases in there. The base, the notches, the beginning of the lateral edges, and then they were fractured, and enough there to identify it as Otter Creek Focus, which had been dug in Wisconsin but not in Michigan. And so we were able to date that site based on that, and that was only the 4th site in the state from that time period because it was a pine forest then. So a lousy habitation environment for people or animals, but the theory is if they were here, and we know they were living along the Great Lakes beaches. But at that time the lakes were lower, so any of those, what we would call middle archaic sites, are underwater.
Yeah.
So there was an extension of Saginaw Bay at the time called the Shiawassee Embayment, and the 4 sites from that time period, 2 of them are at Frankenmuth, Weber 1 and Weber 2, one's at Chesney, and then the one that I have at Montrose. So all 4 of them are associated with this now extinct beach of the Shiawassee Embayment.
Are there any sites where you're trying to do underwater?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but on Native American sites, it's just so unstable, and the water has worn the stone so much, it's very difficult to identify. Now, shipwrecks, that's the area that it's being done the most in. I have a little experience in that too, because I did a tour in the Coast Guard between my sophomore and junior year of undergrad.
That's an interesting life.
Yeah, I did retrospect with Jerry Mass and Michael Moore on National Public Radio from 72 to 79.
Oh, wow.
We were on Saturday
I
nights.
know Michael Moore's trying to get on our show.
Is he really?
Yeah, we told him,
Well, let's see. If he makes another movie. You know what, and Michael, I've said this to you before, but I really feel like you need a presence in downtown Flint.
Yes.
An office here would go a long way to reestablishing, just normal relations.
Yeah.
And, the Capitol Theater renovations are near completion, and even just a symbolic effort there would be something I know the Mott Foundation is interested in doing. I've talked to Clark Tibbetts and William White about that. And when I did the Pachamama training, this is the Ashwar people bracelet from Ecuador. And the Ashwar people are stewards of over 5,000 square miles of rainforest. And they practice awakening the dreamer because they believe we are sleepwalking in North America. And they're praying that we'll wake up before we destroy the whole rainforest.
God, that is just...
It's a beautiful concept, and it's true in many ways.
It's so, they feel sorry for us, don't they, kind of in a way? I mean, and they're also like
Yeah.
worried about us, they're like concerned.
They understand that we have more dinero than them. And
No,
so.
they realize that we're kind of stupid and we need to wake up.
Well, we're living in the material world.
So we need to go down there and be enlightened.
Yeah, they're very interesting people, and there was just a piece recently about how the oil companies are driving even farther into the rainforest, and the indigenous peoples there are basically this is their last refuge, and if the oil companies are allowed to go in there and do that, then that will be it for them. So they basically are taking a stand, and they're saying, we understand blowguns against machine guns. We're not going to win, but what choice do we have? So it's a sad day, but there is an awakening going on. I truly believe in the shift. The 2012 energy. I've worked with 2 shamans in 40 years. They both said the same thing, that it was an ongoing process that probably was initiated with the harmonic convergence in '87 and probably will extend to around 2030. But that the peak was 2012, and that part of that is the reemergence of the sacred feminine, and not only bringing the sacred feminine back to an equal place of power and voice and respect, but also within men coming into a place within ourselves of realizing that we're out of balance as well, and the 5,000 years of this male-dominated Western exploitive paradigm that's coming to an end now. Part of that is this shift that's going, and we're coming into an awareness of the oneness of the planet. And I'm going to just go one step further. I don't know if you guys are aware of Dr. David Hawkins, who along with Linus Pauling discovered muscle testing or kinesiology and the use of being able to hold an item, and if it's okay for you, you can resist, but if it's not, they can take one finger and push your arm down. My doctor actually uses it at Preventive Medicine Center. It's pretty widely recognized as a very profound, it's another thing that's just not written about because the powers that be don't want people being in power. They want them turning the TV on and being told what to do. But Hawkins used this technique to create a scale. It's called the Hawkins scale. And Wayne Dyer quotes it, Marianne Williamson, a number of people. And he found that 200 on this scale, up to 1 to 1,000, and Christ is like 999999999. You know, Buddha and all these people are real high, but 200 on this scale, the Hawkins scale, is the difference between survivalism below 200 and every man for himself kind of thing, and above 200 there is a potential, again quantum potential, for compassion and empathy for everyone. And he said that from 1987, when the harmonic convergence took place, we were in the low 180s, that we made a quantum leap and we're in the low 200s now. We're like 207. So now we have, as a species, the potential spiritually to see the oneness of the whole planet, and not just other people, but the plants and the animals, and how that all works together, and how we're in the 6 mass extinction right now. So the bats and the penguins and the frogs are the canaries in the coal mine, and the bees. Yeah, the turtles, yes. And so all of this is kind of all coming together at this time. And we're being presented with a choice. If we want to return to a more holistic way of life, which indigenous peoples represent, and almost their worldview as well, where you see time as a reoccurring pattern of cycles or fractals, rather than linear Western time that has beginning and ending. You know, change is very disturbing in Western time, but in indigenous time frame, change is expected And in fact, if change doesn't happen, they start wondering what's wrong. So it's a completely different worldview, but it's inclusive. And I think that that is the potential that we're being presented with. And I see people waking up, because I also facilitate a Course in Miracles group 2 times a week. And I just see people really waking up to their own divinity, their own power, their own spirituality, and they recognize that the power of one can create so many changes that can be positive. And we've seen it here in Flint, you know, with the redevelopment of downtown, the reinvention, the creation of what was at one time, you know, the highest per capita income.
Yeah, it was.
And I remember seeing it.
I don't think it'll ever be like that again, and I don't think it needs to be.
No.
Because we were very destructive at that time. But when you were talking about the sacred feminine, it was one of the things that that made me think of is, remember when everybody had the plastic bags and nobody had the cloth bags and they weren't selling them anywhere? I was emailing all these stores telling them that they should sell them. So I would have cloth bags and I would always have to argue with the cashier sometimes. And they would ask me, oh, why do you have that? It was a lot of trouble, it was too much trouble. And I would get in trouble sometimes because I'd argue with the cashier. Yeah, I have. Because I would try to explain to them that it was horrible, all these plastic bags were so horrible. Finally, I boiled it down to one thing. And what I would say is, I'm concerned about the environment because I love my children, and I'm concerned about the environment they're being left with. And I thought that's a short, simple answer that might make them feel guilty.
Well, it's certainly something everyone can relate to, or most everyone.
But that would be like your sacred feminine, I think, in that attitude of having to take care of
It also reminds me of, I forget what nation it was, but there's a worldview, one of the indigenous nations in North America, that's what your actions will do 600 years from now. Always have that mindset, like, what will I affect in the future? And I don't think that, you know, the Western mindset is what can I do now?
Immediate gratification.
Yeah, there's no consequences, essentially, as long as the pleasure's there.
They can't love their children. How can you be so destructive in the environment and not even, if you have children, how can you be that evil? I just don't understand.
Well, we're seeing the results of it in the obesity issue, the health of the kids. There's an interesting study out that shows that the kids being born now have the potential, the first generation, to live past 100, but they also have the potential to die the youngest because of violence, because of diet, because of lack of education. We're not 28th or 29th in the world in math and science by accident. They did not. They started to see what creating an educational or a generation and empowering them with the hippie movement in the 60s and 70s. They saw what that did, and that really, I think, frightened the establishment. And that's when we saw all the changes take place. The funding started to be cut. And,
well, you can't control educated people like you can stupid people.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I think the variable they never saw was the internet. I think if you believe in like the Illuminati, and they visited me twice, so I am beyond believing they exist, that they've made themselves very open to me, and based on the fact that my father and grandfather both, I think, were 33rd, well, I know they were 33rd degree level Masons, and they were very high. One ran the whole Midwest, and the other was in the House of Representatives, and so they follow those bloodlines very closely. And when I questioned it at one point, they showed up in my driveway and in front of my house twice in one night. The very night I questioned it on the phone, so somehow they were able to even tie into my phone line somehow. But you know, when you look at the results, I mean, that's what it's really all about. And you know, I get involved in politics is less than I used to, but I always say, what are the results? What are the results at the end of a Democratic administration versus a Republican administration? We see at the end of Clinton, we see at the end of Jimmy Carter even, that the working people were better off. And at the end of every Republican administration after Eisenhower, who I think was the last really honest, forthright president that we had, we see that the working people are not as well off. So what are the results? That ultimately is it. And I look at most of the Native American indigenous peoples were matriarchal. You followed your lineage through the woman's side of the family. And the great example of that are the Iroquois in New York, who are still on the same property they were on when Columbus arrived. They were never moved. And of course, New York was one of the first places settled. They played both the English and the French kind of against each other, but they had their own governmental structure with representational districts that were elected. And Ben Franklin actually stayed with them at Onondaga, the Central Fire, and studied their governmental structure before he went to Philadelphia. And their system was a beautiful gender balance in that only men could serve, but only women could vote.
Whoa!
And that system has been in place, we thought, till originated around 1500, 1503, somewhere in there. The latest archaeological evidence from New York indicates it goes back to at least 1100.
Wow.
So there's a
It's the
system,
first like active democracy in that sense.
in a sense, that we know of, that we have evidence for. So here is an outcome. Here we can look at almost 1,000 years of a functional system that was able to withstand this cultural onslaught, all these pathogens, and yet they were able to anchor themselves and not sell out. So that to me is an amazing message, and it speaks to the role of both genders as being honored and equally valued as an important aspect of a healthy society. And of course, that's what anthropology studies. And so it's an important aspect. And we're transitioning right now, and it's an exciting time. And if you believe in reincarnation, which I do, I think most of us chose to come at this time to see this birthing of this new time that's coming in. So
That's good though.
it's an exciting time
It's
to
a
be
good,
here.
you know, we could probably go on and on and on. I mean, you know, it's like, I'm kind of filming in front of the camera here, but that's a good note to leave it on. Or do you have anything else?
Well,
to
No,
say?
that's
I would like
fine,
to
unless you
ask-
have another question.
Well, I'd just like to ask, where can people come find you on the Artwalk?
I'm usually at the Yoga Loft, and Lois has been good enough to make a table available for me. And so for about 3 years solid, I've been able to do the presentations. For the next month or two, it's kind of iffy. I know for sure August I won't be there because I have a gathering that I'm going to, but I'm usually there, and if not, they can catch me there when I'm doing yoga.
Awesome.
Which I recommend for everyone because
Yeah.
it's really good for, I would never have imagined, the broad spectrum of advantages. Even my golf game, which was heading toward a double-digit handicap, is back to a 4,
Oh, nice.
which is amazing at my age to be able to play at that
It's that
level.
added flexibility.
Flexibility, core
Awareness,
strength.
maybe.
Yes, yeah, even the spiritual aspect, even somehow it slowed down my swing. So I can't even begin to articulate the spectrum of benefits, but it's really it's across the board.
And it's right here in Flint.
Absolutely, beautiful
The Yoga
downtown
Loft,
Flint.
Right.
Yoga Loft, is it considered Saginaw Street that it's on?
No,
Because
that's
it's kind of
on Second, right?
Well,
Yeah, it's on
the corner.
Second, right
It's on
across almost from the Capitol Theater, but it's the building it's in, the Wade Trim building, faces on Saginaw.
Right.
So you
So
just kind
it's-
of go around, and
Yeah,
for those of you who've been
I think
around
so.
long enough, it's where the old Vogue store used to be. And one of the last cool things that I got to do when I first came back in '72 was I managed the 5th floor of Smith Bridgman's, which was the anchor department store in downtown Flint, which is over here where the parking lot is now. And it was the oldest department store in the entire United States. Here's another aspect of the vortex of Flint, on its original location.
And now it's a parking lot.
Now it's a parking lot, and it was 8 stories, and it was like a Hudson's or a Macy's. It was really high quality. And when I was there, Mr. Mott owned it. And then he sold it to Ellis Good out of West Virginia. But Flint is an amazing place to be, and there were so many people that mentored me. There were so many wonderful individuals that were into the Native American movement, or were collectors, or anthropologists. And of course, we've had U of M here since '57, and that's been a fabulous influence. But people like Richard Port, Don Simons, just unbelievable.
We want to thank you for coming on the
thanks a
show.
lot.
Oh, thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Can I come back?
Yeah, our
always.
show's gonna be like 2 hours long on the internet.
That's okay,
It's
because
gonna
it'll
be
be
really
all
hard for
old,
me
it'll be great.
It's gonna be hard for me to whittle it down, it's so good.
But I think we gotta go to Underwriters, or is it
Page's
a few
Bookstore
clicks
is
on the
locally
Underwriters?
owned and is located at
I'm gonna say both. You can just
132
add out the one
West
that's not
2nd
there.
Street in
So we're
downtown
going-
Flint.
yeah, we're going to the
at
Underwriters
Buckham
right
Alley.
now, and we'll,
Showcase for
Peace.
local authors
Peace
and
out.
artists. Visit during the second Friday Art Walk.
And we're back with our second guest, Kedree.
How you doing, Kedree? It's nice to be here. Yeah, it's good to have you. He's a local musician from such fame as Thick as Thieves, Covert Operation, Kedree and Friends. What else are you doing these days?
All kinds of stuff. I just got done doing a project with the Whiting Auditorium, and it's been a lot of fun. They got me doing this 45-minute Johnny Cash set for all the senior centers around town.
Very cool.
And that's it's been a really positive experience for me.
Sure, it's a different kind of audience than you used to, I'm sure.
Yeah. And apart from that, I've been writing a lot, and I've been trying to put together the project for the summer and for the next 5 years, really.
Very cool.
Next 5 years.
5 year plan.
Oh, for sure.
Musician that has a 5-year plan, that's great.
Well, they say that you hit your musical prime at 30, and I'm 19.
Planning for being.
Yeah, you got a plan for you.
All right, but in between 30 and 36, that's when it's go time. So since I'm about to turn 31, I think it's,
So at the end of the 5 year plan, it's $1 million and a mega mansion and all that fun stuff? Or?
Well, hopefully I'll be able to live comfortably. That's
Hopefully,
really,
yeah.
I don't know about the mansion and all the frills and everything yet, but that might be 10 years.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
We'll see, but.
What was it you were doing with the Whiting?
Well, it was basically a Ruth Mott funded operation that was brought forth to me by a really lovely lady, a nice lady named Christy Lackey, who is the education and outreach coordinator at the Whiting. And she called me up on reference from a friend of mine, Ben Schlater, who's a percussionist. And the whole thing is they wanted to bring the entertainment of Whiting out to the seniors who might not necessarily be able to go to the Whiting and see it. So, and it had to be educational, so it gave me an opportunity to learn a lot of the music of Johnny Cash, some of the covers that he did, and some of the, of course, the epic tunes that he wrote, and some of the storyline behind those songs to kind of talk to the audience and segue each tune. And they really enjoyed it, and it was some of the most gratifying, shows that I've played in a while, just because of how well it was received,
For sure.
So,
what's your favorite Johnny Cash song?
Oh gosh, it's hard to pick. I don't know, but maybe I'll play one for you guys.
That'd be great. Fantastic. So I know you guys are doing a couple festivals this summer, some of your different projects. What is Thick as Thieves doing?
June 8th, Thick as Thieves is playing at Free Music Festival. That's in Freeland, at this beautiful park up there. There's a lot more information on Facebook.com. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's all free. It's it's all day. It ends at about 9 o'clock. I think it starts at about noon is when music starts. So Mac Pods will be there, of course, Thick as Thieves, and a bunch of other great local talent. But like I said, it's all free. So it's a free festival. Take the family and kids up there, and if you like disc golf, there's of course the disc golf tournament. Mm-hmm. I think I'll be doing that as well. So
Very cool.
You must make your money then with selling your CDs and shirts and things. I mean, you have a lot. What kind of...
Well, unfortunately, in this business, you don't make a whole lot of money on original music. So I work during the week in like the Rochester, Royal Oak, Livonia, St. Clair Shores area. Just doing a duet case with a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Dave Kroon, and it's called the Kroon Duet. Or we do have a full band that plays together. That we play at a lot of different venues in that area. But that helps to pay the bills.
Well, I was trying to segue into you giving us the address where we can find your music and things.
Well, you can find a lot of music from Covert at covertband.com. Also, Thick as Thieves at thickasthievesofficial.com. As far as my solo stuff, that's yet to be released. So, but there's also a lot of music on archive.org. So if you look up Covert or if you look up Thick as Thieves, maybe even look up Kedree Young, you can find a lot of music on archive. So it's a great site.
So Covert's also opening up for a pretty big band coming up here, Rusted Root, right?
Yeah, we're doing a show with Rusted Root, and we played with them before on a couple different occasions. This is actually going to be the 4th time we played with them, but June 15th, actually I think it's 14th, 15th, and 16th, we're playing at the Buttermilk Jamboree, and Rusted Root's headlining, and then we're playing afterward. That's Saturday the 15th.
Very
get into music anyway?
Oh gosh, I guess I was born into it. Yeah, I mean, people ask, well, how do you learn harmonies? How do you learn how to sing harmonies? Well, go to church for about the first 12 years of your life and sing a lot and see what happens, you know. Not that you have to do that to learn harmonies, but to instill it in you to where it's kind of just second nature. It takes a lot of repetition and kind of, you know, so I kind of grew up in a Nazarene church, and my father sang 4-part harmony gospel music, kind of like barbershop style, you know, for a long time. And I was always involved in the theater. My mother's name is Rhonda Young, and she's pretty well known, you know, in the theater, at least the local theater business. You know, she's directed plays at Cloud Cast and Crew, right over here. I remember the name of this building. It's right across the street from Buckham Alley Theater. That's right. So, you know, as a kid, I was just always on stage. You know, I was always close to the stage, and you know, I was always been singing and playing whatever instrument I could get my hands on.
Have you ever acted?
I've done a bit of acting, and I'd love to do acting more in the future. It's not something that I actively pursue, but it's definitely something that I love to do, and you know, I like to do impressions and voices. And
Oh, really? Do an impression.
Then you're gonna put me on the spot. I'm not Robert De Niro. That's all I
I do a Johnny Cash impression.
Hi, I'm Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, you know
That's all you gotta do for Johnny Cash. No, of course I don't look like Johnny. A kid just called me Johnny Cash at random the other day. He didn't even know why. I don't know if you're gonna put that in or whatever. But I mean, who knows? I mean, but yeah, maybe I got the spirit of Johnny somehow. You know,
channeled it to his music.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just delving into so much Johnny's music has, you know, helped bring out the spirit.
Have you always played the guitar?
Not always, I suppose. I mean, basically since I was about 13, I picked up the acoustic guitar. Before that, I never really played any instruments besides the drums.
You know, I was going to say, it's almost like I can remember a long, long time ago seeing you playing the drums.
Yeah, I still do. I've kind of moved more toward guitar because I grew up with 2 older brothers who also played, and one of them played the drums already, and the other one played the keyboards, so it was kind of natural for me to play the guitar, you know, and even though we all kind of play as many instruments as we can too, you know, it's just like I said, one of those things that they say is a gift. And it is a gift that you have to do every day for days on end to get good at. You know.
Is it almost a curse sometimes?
Yes, not almost. It's a blessing and a curse. It kind of puts you in this life that you kind of owe it to yourself to fulfill. You know, you kind of be doing yourself in the world a disservice if you didn't.
Well, you are a creative person though, because I know you also do some two-dimensional artwork.
I do, and 3D art. That was actually kind of my first passion before music. That was what my parents had always envisioned for me from about the age of maybe 5 or 6, because I just started drawing, and I grew up drawing comic books and Ninja Turtles and things like that, and it just kind of developed from there into drawing people and portraits, and I kind of grasped that concept early on, and I got into painting, and I had an amazing art tutor when I was about 12 years old, about in middle school. I lived in Bel Air, and the guy and his wife and their son had moved into town to kind of he was going to take the place of the art teacher that was already currently there, that was getting ready to retire. And they were staying at a bed and breakfast right in town, and they were paying all this money to live, and Bel Air was just kind of expensive. So they met my mom, and we had this house, and we had this extra little side wing of this old house that we said would fit perfect. You know, all they had to do was give me art lessons.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So for a while, for about a year he lived at the house with us and gave me all kinds of amazing tips and helpful things that kind of guided me to, being proficient at art, So, but I've done that so much, and through high school I continued, and I still do. I put it on hold a lot because music has taken such precedent. But gosh, it's still a passion in my life, and I do plan on furthering that. I want to make 3D art. I want to make really big art, giant things and big pieces. Metal sculpture. I mean, I don't do metal work myself, but I have the creative concept for it, and I can put a team together that can build some really. I mean, there's so many amazing artists around Flint. I mean, Todd Nicola for one. Pauly, Everett. I mean, there's just a lot of great artists around. I couldn't even begin to name them all, but I mean, I'd love to do some.
It's like I've always said, if you're a creative person, your medium is whatever's in your hands.
Yeah, I like that.
And I can tell that you're that way. It's great. So, anyway, do you have any more questions for her?
No, I'm just excited to hear. You gonna play some of your solo stuff, or what are the songs you're gonna do?
Well, I've written a couple songs this year already, and I'm gonna play 2 of those for you today. I write in a lot of different genres, and like I said, I play in a bunch of different projects. Also, I don't want to leave out the Celebrity Death Toast. I don't know if we can talk about that, but that's a group with my brother Damon on the bass guitar. He's usually a drummer, but he's on the bass. Todd Nicola plays guitar. And a guy by the name of Mark Dixon plays the drums. And we've been playing for a long time and never really, we've all been involved in different projects, but still get together, still record, and it's just fun basement, rock, I probably won't play any of that for you on acoustic guitar today, but if you can check it out, there's also a Facebook for the Celebrity Death Toast. So apart from that, I might do you a Johnny Cash song and those 2 songs, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Great.
This song I wrote earlier this February when I was getting kind of down in the dumps because the winter would just not let go this year in the Midwest, and there's been a name for what I would call normally Michiganders, and that's the people from Michigan, but I've started calling y'all Michigan heads, mitten heads. That's the new nickname for Michiganders. This here song's called Mitten Head Blues.
very much. My name's Nick Custer. This is Jennie Moench. I want to thank Thomas Selva, Island, Drummond, and of course Kedree Young. This has been the Flint Underground Presents Creative Alliance Showcase, and peace out.
The song's called Same Old Shoes.
Whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Johnny Cash. Try that one more time.
Let's say it for the blooper reel.
Hi, I'm Johnny Cash. Well, I hear the train coming, it's rolling around the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. Well, I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, time keeps dragging on, but the whistle blowing down San Antonio. When I was just a baby, my mama told man in Reno just to watch him die. But I hear the truth from Lola, I lay my head and cry. Well, I've been through this folksy in fancy dining cars. Well, they're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. Well, I know I had it coming, I know I can be free. But those people keep on moving, and that's what tortures me. And if I ever get out of prison, if that railroad train was mine, well, I bet I'd move out over somewhere further down the line. But from Folsom Prison, that's where I want to stay. And I let that lonesome place go, oh my blues over.
So that you can say it?
No.
You finally wrote it?
I finally.
Hello, I'm Jennie Bunch.
I can't wait till
Literally since
I
day one,
copied
we started like 2
it.
years
I
ago.
copied it.
It just says, hello, my name's Jennie Bunch. And she's like, no, you read it. You read it, it's okay.
So he read it like that.
can't wait till we get the blooper reel going, dude.
Yeah, it'll be like hours and hours of bloopers. Are we started? Did we miss the theme song yet? Should we do the theme song?
Yeah, the theme song.
Oh,
Oh, that's not a theme song, is it?
Yeah.
We'll just start like this.